Hello, everyone, and welcome to Access4's very first Access the Execs. This is a different type of webinar for us. This is not talking products or features or solutions. This is a business conversation. We're taking some great leaders and thought leaders around business processes and leadership, and we're going to have a chat about some of the pressing issues that are affecting us all in business today. My name is Peter Eldon. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing, and join me today to talk about moving from a survive mindset into a thrive mindset of some really great business minds. We have the lovely Jeni Clift, who is a professional entrepreneurial operating system implementer, EOS, as well as a successful business person and a Harley Davidson driver. We have Zoe Ruth, who is an Australian leadership expert and an author and a podcaster and a hiker. I'm sure she abseils. She does lots of cool stuff. And we have Tim Jackson, our very own. And Tim Jackson is the managing director and founder of Access4. And I probably should have thought of something cool to say, but he is a pretty okay lawn bowler and he's a pretty good basketballer, as I'm sure he'll tell everyone. And I've asked these guys to join me today to have a chat about something that's super relevant, which is, talking about our mindset and where we may be as business leaders and managers around what's happened over the last couple of years and how we could be thinking and how we position ourselves to take, and not only ourselves, but also our staff and our customers of the opportunity moving forward. So what we'll do is just a little bit of housekeeping. If you do have any questions, please throw those into the Q&A and we will get them to the end. We will have some surveys and a few giveaways to go. So please join in with the surveys and give us your feedback as well. Would be greatly appreciative. So before I bring on our guests to have a chat about this topic, let's have a little bit of a reset as to where we are and how we got here. Now, I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but the last couple of years have been quite interesting. I'm sick of hearing the word unprecedented. It would be nice to hear the word precedented for a while and have a bit of stability. But, what we saw is, from December 19, with bushfires affecting so many different areas in the country, then we had, this thing called COVID-19 that's rocked up in early March that hit us. We all really got behind each other on that. We really, as a nation, we were locked in together and we expected really to come out of that quite quickly. And we did. Bit of a false dawn. What we saw then is Delta appeared in May of 21, and we saw a real significant impact in various areas. And that was really the big start of seeing different parts of the country and particularly the world affected differently. So as managers and as leaders, we might have had different groups of staff who are now being affected differently and have different access. We certainly have customers who are going in and out of lockdown and causing this real uncertainty. And as I said, back then led back into lockdowns. And then where we are today is we're really seeing the whole country coming out of that and really what that opportunity brings. But how are we thinking about this whole process? What is our mindset of our customers, our staff? And are we in a position to take most advantage of what should be a good opportunity? If we look back in history, right? If we look at the Black Death, there was the Renaissance. After the Spanish flu, there was the Roaring Twenties. And so, all the pundits will tell you that there will be opportunity that will present itself post these events. And of course, a whole heap of more uncertainty, because one of the only things we can be that is certain right now is uncertainty. But how do we get our mind set and how do we help our staff and our peers and our customers be in a position to take advantage and also navigate whatever comes forward? So to help me answer those questions and get to the bottom of this, I've got some great guests. So the first person I would like to introduce is Zoe Ruth. Zoe, are you there?
Hi, Pete.
Hey, Zoe, how are you going?
I'm good, thank you.
You're coming to us all the way from sunny Canberra, is that correct?
Oh, it is actually sunny today. So yes, I am indeed from Canberra.
I checked the weather. I know it was nice. Actually, it was a guess. And Zoe, please tell me a bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure, thanks. I'm a leadership expert. I specialize in the people dynamics of leadership. And I love to work with big thinkers with big hearts who want to make a big difference. And largely I do that with senior executive teams on looking at their strategy and their culture and the intersection of those two.
Wonderful. And I've worked a pleasure of working a little bit with Zoe in the past as well. So I'm really excited to get Zoe's thoughts on how we're thinking and what we can do moving forward. So thank you for joining us. And also joining us today as well is Jeni Clift. Jeni, are you there?
I am indeed.
Welcome, Jeni. It's an absolute pleasure to see you as well. I've had the pleasure of working with Jeni for a number of years as well as my customer in various states, which has always been fantastic. So Jeni, please give yourself and what you do a shameless plug.
Sure. So I guess I'm an entrepreneur above all else. I'm an EOS implementer. So I trained as a professional EOS implementer about 3 years ago. Started my first business back in 1996 with my husband, Nick, as and what kind of became an MSP. So been working in that sort of the tech sector for just over 25 years.
Yeah, fantastic. And you're based out of Melbourne, is that right? Or Victoria?
Victoria. We live in Geelong, but we normally spend half our time in Melbourne. We have an apartment in Northcote, so the inner northern suburbs, and an office in Brunswick.
Fantastic, and welcome, and thank you for giving us your time. And finally, squaring off our panel is Tim Jackson. Tim Jackson is the MD and founder of Access4. So please welcome Tim and tell us a little bit about Access4.
Thanks, Pete. Yeah, so my background's in IT. I saw a bit of white space with some of the other exec founders back in 2015 around trying to support MSPs to be able to sell unified comms. And that real passion for MSPs to be successful. So we built our own proprietary platform to really sort of ensure that vision. And I think 5 years later, we've sort of grown to about 55 staff, which is great. But more importantly, we're supporting 250 partners and have about 150,000 services out there in the business community.
Brilliant, and thanks for coming along, although you had to. So you didn't get a choice on this one. So okay, let's get amongst it. We've set the scene. We know what's got us to this point. So I think everyone's fully aware of our history. Zoe, I'm going to start with you. What does the survival mindset look like? What are the things that leaders and managers may be feeling right now, and how would you characterize those?
Sure, thanks, Pete. Well, as you mentioned, like when the pandemic hit, it caused all sorts of uncertainty. It was changed circumstances, and what we know about the human brain and humans in general, when we have radical changes like that, we can go into an amygdala hijack. And the amygdala is a part of our brain that assesses for threat. And if we see a threat, then it fires off cortisol and adrenaline and puts us into fight or flight mode. So we are survival mode, essentially. And when this happens, we lose a couple of functions in favor of some survival functions. So we lose or downregulate our executive brain function, which is all our rational, logical thinking. And we get a bit of a tunnel vision, which is all about, am I going to be able to face down and deal with this particular survival threat? And we lose our ability to empathize, to learn, to progress. So in responding to challenges such as the pandemic, a lot of us, well, pretty much all of us, went into amygdala hijack land, and survival became our primary instinct for good reason. A lot of us had our income streams bottom out. We didn't know how long this thing was going to last. We didn't know we were physically going to last. So there's three kind of mindsets or responses that we had as a result of this in the immediate. And the first one is about being a fighter. So it's like, this pandemic, I'm just going to fight my way out. I'll do whatever it takes to get through. And I will be defensive as much as I possibly can at hanging on to my business and to make sure that I don't lose access to all my market channels and all that kind of stuff. So fighter is one response. Another response, which I saw on occasion, was the hibernator. It's like so panicked about what's going on. It's like, okay, we'll just batten down the hatches and weather the storm as best we can, and sort of maintain a low profile, maintain the status quo, and hope for the best, which we can talk about is not the best option because you lose a whole bunch of opportunities in doing that. And the third one is about being a hunter. So this becomes more opportunistic. It's like, right, okay, I see what's happening around here. I'm going to go and hunt for that low hanging fruit as best as I can. And I will snatch and grab whatever I can in order to make this happen. So all of these are okay strategies in the immediate threat zone, but not long-term in terms of our expanding business context. So yeah, fighter, hibernator, or hunter is what I've often seen in the immediate response to the pandemic, which sort of characterizes the survival mindset.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I remember we did a webinar in a previous life at the very start of this, and you know, you were talking about these three, and you could see it live happening. How do you feel that the false dawns, how have they affected that mindset where, you know, we think that light's at the end of a tunnel, but that might actually be a train coming at us? And you know, in those three, how does that affect those three? Do they lean more into that, or can they shift in those mindsets?
What your comments make me think of, this false dawn, I think that's what you said, right? False dawn. Yeah. So we think we're just going to get through it, and then we have this massive cataclysm disappointment thing. And in Man's Search for Meaning, which is Viktor Frankl's amazing piece of work, which if you haven't read it, I totally recommend it. It's a very powerful book. It's about a man who learns a lot as a survivor of the Holocaust in a concentration camp. And he has incredible life lessons about mindset and focus during that time. And one of his observations was those that believed that they were going to be out by a particular date were the ones who were constantly deflated and disappointed and would die earlier. If they thought they would be out by Christmas, Christmas came and went and they were still in prison. The effect of that deflation was cataclysmic, and they ended up dying of disappointment in some ways and couldn't harness that resilience that others had. The ones that survived were ones who said, we're going to get out, we're going to hold fast to that faith and deal with where we are right now. They didn't know when, they just knew that was the end goal, that was the end game, and they were going to hold fast to that. And that sort of makes a really big division in terms of how we can experience catastrophe and get through it. If we think we're going to be done and dusted by a particular date, we may be setting false expectations. If we know that the end game is to get out, to thrive, to be of service, to be productive, we don't know when or how, but that's the end game, then that can actually pull us through the adversity in which we face. Yeah,
really good point. Deal with what you have, and whatever comes next, you rather than have an expectation of it ending on a certain date. So yeah, certainly for our friends in Victoria, that would probably be very good advice over the last couple of years. So Jeni, bringing you in, those three mindsets that Zoe was talking about. How do you? Oh, and sorry, there's a survey up there as well, everyone. So please give us your feedback as well, as if you could relate to any of those particular mindsets as always put up. But Jeni, just on those three, that fighter, hibernator, hunter, from an EOS standpoint, so from that, you know, those operating systems that help a business thrive, have you seen those type of mindsets, and how does that affect business processes and that leadership?
Oh, absolutely. And I've seen it, you know, not necessarily the words, but, you know, it makes total sense. But I think just thinking through some instances of somebody I know who runs a talent agency, a particular client they've been trying to get for years, that one of their main competitor just went into hibernator mode. They literally didn't answer their phones. So this client that they'd been after, tried, nobody answered the phone. So they rang the competitor, who's a person I know, and they've now got a very, very well-known brand. You know, they went into fighter and probably hunter mode. Their competitor went into hibernator, and it's, you know, they've lost a major brand through that. I think as again, in that hibernator, one thing that I've seen is people sort of going into that you know, desperation mode of perhaps saying yes when they should say no, and just saying yes to every opportunity that does come their way, that, you know, normally, or, you know, if you were looking longer term rather than surviving, you know, this week, this month, you would have said no. And processes just going out the window, just, you know, and the owner of the business going to DIY mode. I'll do it myself. And I think that's a search for certainty when everything else is uncertain around you, and you're in that perhaps fighter mode. You just start doing everything yourself, which again is very, very short term.
Yeah, absolutely. And would it be fair to say that, you know, if you had weaknesses in your processes before all this hit, they didn't get better when it went into a diverse or a disrupted workplace, and there was all this stress on people? And is that something that you saw there, that, you know, and that's where those people went back into that entrepreneurial kind of selling mindset where they just, I'll just do it all myself?
Exactly. And processes, you know, I'm sure for many business owners, if you went and had a look at processes from 2 years ago to now, they're just not even relevant. They'd be completely changed.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? You know, Tim, what we do is, and, you know, shameless plug on Access4, but, you know, what we do is deliver that work from anywhere environment. And, you know, that was obviously super prevalent right now through what's happened. But, you know, if you have everyone in an office, you can kind of be light on the processes, right? Because you can keep an eye on everyone, you can kind of make it work. But when you get displaced, you really need to have that trust in processes and people that they're going to be doing the work that's required. What have you seen through this last couple of years that's really interested you about what businesses have been doing around either implementing processes or technology to help them through this?
Yeah, I think it's been interesting, Pete. I think Zoe's point around probably not knowing in the first part was a challenge. I think no one thought it was going to last this long, so they were making really short decisions probably across those three profiles. I think as it actually started to pan out more, people had to sit back and go, well, hold on a second, this isn't just going to be a 4 or 6 week issue. This could, 2 years nearly. So I think absolutely, I think we've seen a lot of risk adverse decisions made, especially in MSPs. I think decisions not to bring on more products and just to stick with what they know, yet there was a massive opportunity in the modern workplace to get out there and provide really good customer solutions. I think the not going on site or, you know, pausing projects actually was probably more detrimental to them than they would have if they had a thought about it and pushed through. So I get it, everyone's in a different position, so one size doesn't fit all. But certainly we saw a massive amount of opportunities, and customers were willing to move because it was business affecting. So I think the ones that actually took a step back and said, great, we'll work around this, not necessarily through it, made some really good decisions and brought the products on that people wanted, worked around how to get onto site or roll these solutions out when you couldn't do it the old way. And they've probably come out the other side thinking, yeah, great, we made the right call. But I think everyone was in that March last year, you know, what do we do? Like, we all had to move to home within 24 hours. We were lucky because we were prepped. A lot of people weren't. So I think a lot of people got caught in the back foot. Yeah,
there was a lot of, you couldn't buy toilet paper or web cameras, which is, it's not a combo I want to see, right? That's not ideal, but it was some crazy times. So look, we've got some survey results here. So interesting, Zoe, we've got Fighter and Hunter are neck and neck at 39% for Fighter and 37% for Hunter, and Hibernator was 24. So it's funny, you know, because there's probably no right or wrong there, but for me, I relate more to a Fighter and Hunter. So I'm like, yes, good answers, but it's not really right or wrong. It's just how people feel, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. So was that a rhetorical statement, or was that a question?
A rhetorical one, yes. it turned rhetorical when I saw that you had your mute on. I went, oh, what have I done to you? Sorry. But yeah, as a father, I'm constantly talking to myself, so it's something I'm very used to. So it's good. So yeah, so really interesting. Thank you everyone for giving that survey. So really to recap there, what I got out of that, which is very different to how I think, was, you know, rather than looking for that end point, is just dealing with what's in front of you and making that situation the best. You know, I certainly looked at that Hunter mode, but I also look at, Tim, your point there about you know, rather than using the emotional part of that decision making, using the logic. So the emotion is, yeah, I don't want to necessarily do new things, but if the logic says, well, I should do a new thing because that helps me in this scenario, it helps my customers out, as Jeni said with that one when it hibernating. But then you've got to measure those two and make sure you're making logical decisions rather than just emotional ones. So thank you guys. That's a good review as to where we are. So moving on to the next one, which is about how do we get out of that mindset and how do we help our peers and our customers and our staff. So I'll start with you again, Zoe. Is that how can we shift our decision-making process into a more, I guess, positive or into a thrive mindset?
Thanks, Pete. Well, I think the important thing to know is that having a realistic and optimistic mindset is part of having a thrive mindset. So, and those two combined are really important. So the realism part is essential. And there's a principle that says, confront the brutal facts. And brutal being the operative word, because sometimes during the pandemic, it did feel brutal looking at what we had to contend with. And when we can actually look at what we are dealing with and actually say, okay, this is the circumstances, this is the mess that we've got to process, then that actually puts some boundaries or certainties around the uncertainties. Like, okay, and sometimes that might look like, these are the brutal facts, go cry in the shower for 10 minutes and then come back and deal with it. So get the emotion out and going, right. That was just my little experience with confronting the brutal facts. It's like, oh, this is awful. And then, okay, let's deal with it. So that realistic, being a realist part is the first part of it. Now, the optimistic part is coming back to first principles of why you set up your business in the first place. And having a thrive mindset is really coming back and remembering your North Star, which is your purpose. Why is it that you set out to do this business? Why is it that you are in business? Who are you serving? And maybe the how of how you do that needs to change because the circumstances have changed. But the why, that should be your guiding light. So reviewing and tapping to that is the next important piece. And then the second part is about looking at your values. And knowing what your values are will help shape the next set of decisions. I was talking to a CEO who, this is before the pandemic, and she was brought in to deal with a really huge not-for-profit that was failing badly, and they were in the red year after year. And she had to look and confront the brutal facts about all of their systems were broken. They had too many staff that were not in the right roles, and she had to make some hard decisions, and which meant letting a lot of people go and restructuring the business, which is always heartbreaking for any employer. And in doing that, she says, I asked her, like, how did you actually contend with that? Because that's deep emotional work. And she said for her, what she held on to was the mission of the purpose of the business, why it is that we're here, who are we serving, and the values. And all of that made the hard decisions easier. So being a realistic optimist is the first point. So the realism is confront the brutal facts and then keep your eye on the prize in terms of why you're here and who you're serving.
Yeah, really interesting. I can really relate that to our managed service providers, because when we first started this whole process, it was very much that. It's like, well, you know, is my business going to disappear or my customers can't get to work? But you know, once you got past that emotion, that North Star was their services were actually more important through this whole scenario, because it was those managed service providers that were able to get these businesses operational quickly, working from home, as Tim said. And so, you know, once you get past that emotional and the likes, if you focus on that North Star, which was, you know, being that IT provider to their end customers, that actually turned out to be more important in that time rather than less important. So Jeni, bringing you in now on these questions as well is, you know, what tools and processes can businesses implement now to change that, you know, that kind of hibernating or process less or light systems to really to move out of that survive mindset into a thrive.
So there's lots of the EOS tools that come to mind, but I can't cover all of them. What I really wanted to focus on today was about two things. One is having the right people, and Zoe really touched on this about, you know, those people that, you know, they fit your values and you love having them around. They love the company, they love their team members and and your clients, so the right people. But having them in the right seat, so making sure that those people that fit the business are also in the role that actually fits their skills. So they've got the passion and the talent to do their job really well. And EOS has some tools around those, which we'll talk about this later, but there's some books that we'll give away, and the tools are in the books. And the next part is, and I touched on this before about it's called Delegate and Elevate. So it's about making sure that you're getting back to your key role in the business as the owner or as on the leadership team, of being able to, be sitting, in the helicopter, looking down on and working on the business rather than down in the weeds. And if you think of a four-way quadrant, that, top, you've got things that you love doing and you're great at, or you like doing and you're good at. And then in the bottom two, you're good at, but you don't really like doing it, or you just hate it and you're terrible at it. Just, everything you do over a 2-week period, just put that into one of those. Talking to customers, I love it. It's, put it in the top. Doing your expense claim form or whatever it may be, bottom. What can you push off to other people, and make sure that everybody in the business is actually doing what they're great at, what they love, and then you're working on that strategy. What's the business going to look like in 1 year, 3 years, 10 years, and that, so that you're really elevating yourself to the skills where you're best serving the business, your team, your clients.
And the people part is a really topical one, right? As people are more dispersed, how can you, what are processes that can help in this displaced working environment that you've seen really benefit businesses that, when they when people are spread out, and particularly, because not all one doesn't fit all, right? We've got all different departments, and there's introverts and extroverts. What can people do to help in that engagement of remote staff?
I think one thing that really helps is those regular meetings, whether it be your daily huddles, your weekly meetings, and bringing those so that everybody in the business, an article I was reading the other day on, people, the Great Resignation, as they're calling it, is around 4 words: feedback is not being heard. So if everybody's in a meeting and they're giving their feedback, they feel like they're being heard. Everybody owns a number and it's on a scorecard somewhere, so they know job descriptions. They know what their job is. They know what success looks like. They know that how their efforts are impacting the business, and and also that feedback then of is the business doing well? Is it on track? Because then again, that comes back to certainty. If I know that I'm doing a good job and I'm making an impact and the business is doing well, less chance of people moving on.
Yeah, that's a really good point around the business is doing well. So as business leaders, if you go into that hibernator mode, or you're getting very blinkered and quite stressed, staff can see that as that the business is performing poorly, and they start getting nervous about their own income and how they can do. So making sure that you can separate between your stress and your emotions, and also communicate that, hey, the business, I can be angry or upset or frustrated, and that doesn't mean the business is in trouble. It just means I've got my own frustrations to deal with. So that communication point, I think that the more we spread out, becomes more and more important, doesn't it?
Absolutely. One thing that we did, I literally came back home to Australia, I think it was the 10th of March. I'd been in US and then Europe for a couple of weeks. And as I came home, the world was shutting down behind me. And we actually had our EOS quarterly with our implementer. And we came up, we went through a tool of BMW, best case. What's the best case look like? With no idea of what was going to happen. What's M? What's the most likely? And then W, worst case. So we went through, which clients are going to be affected. So we went, I think most likely was 30% hit, best case 20%, and worst was a 40% hit. We then every week told our staff we're on track. We're at 28% hit. We're expecting 30, so everything's okay. And that communication, even telling them that nothing had changed from last week, we kept the team right through. Everybody was happy, and that communication was absolutely vital. But as a leadership team, we slept at night because we knew we had a plan.
Yeah, really good points. Tim, you were in the midst of it, right? You were building a business while all this was going on. What did you see around this, and you know, how did you communicate to the team to help them understand what was going on and also grow in the meantime?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Tim. We got another survey up there, guys. Just relating back to what Jenny was asking. So please give us your feedback on that as well. Sorry, Tim.
No, you're right. Yeah, I think touch on both Jenny and Zoe's points there that we sort of went back to our why we existed, and I think we got out of 2020 saying, yeah, that's great, and we thought the light was at the end of the tunnel. I think, Pete, to your point, it was probably a train and it was the next round coming. So we went in and really thought about the opportunity and moved into that thrive stage by sitting down. We took all of our senior leaders to an offsite for 3 days and really got our heads around what the opportunity was. And, you know, reflecting on the first 5 years, which was great, but more importantly, what we were going to do as a company to make sure we actually thrive for the next 3 years and didn't just sit around waiting for the pandemic to finish. You know, we set new goals. We realized you just can't keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So we had to start looking at those things. We took a fairly pragmatic approach and said, well, what are the things that are going to block us doing it? And how do we get them to the enabler column? And we shifted them to get that strategy and tactical plan. And it really gave us an opportunity, I think, to look at the business and say, well, you know, if we're going to try and achieve X, this is what we've got to do to get there. And it can't just be an overnight. So we put a 3-year plan in place, high level, but in 2 days, and really tackled the things like how we're going to do better acquisition, how we're going to get onboarding to work so it actually scales properly. It's not just about tomorrow, it's about 24 months down the track. You know, our channel model, how do we support partners better? What do they need better from us to make them more successful? And then we also got to the platform side of it, which we'd spent 5 years building. So I think, you know, it was an opportunity for reinvention for us. You know, we sort of went back and said, it's time to reinvent. It's the next horizon. And it gave us a bunch of things that we could do in addition to our BAU. And I think that gave the team confidence, so we weren't just sort of bunkering down. But I think for me, communication was the key one. We had to come out of that saying, we've got a plan, team, and this is the plan. This is the vision, and this is a strategy we've got. And we want you to go and build your departmental vision and strategies to align to that. So don't expect me as the CEO to tell you how to do your job. We're saying this is where we're going, and we're getting everyone on the bus. But you guys have got a really important part of achieving that. So all of our senior leaders have built their own subset of plans to achieve that company goal. And it's really given, I think, everyone in each department the opportunity to say, oh, I am actually contributing. And I see how I contribute, whether it's the flywheel we came up with or the milestones we've put in place. So I think to Jenny's point, I had the note here that it was really around trying to empower leaders. You know, it wasn't going to come from the top. We had to set the vision and the strategy, but we had to empower our next level of leaders to step up and really contribute. So I think that communicating, and I think then the other big one was how do we measure it? Because people actually want to know that they made a difference. So we put a lot of metrics in place to say, well, if we're putting this, we want to check it every quarter to make sure we're there. So out of 12 quarters, how did we actually go and go and execute on it? So I think getting everyone on that journey and making sure there is that level of confidence that the business has a plan and we're going somewhere and they're part of it, I think has helped us to, you know, one, retain all of our staff, but continue to grow through a pandemic as well.
Yeah, very much. And I think there's some really good points out of all of those. I love that. And that survey is back in now, which was do have the right people in the right seat. So 54% are saying we've got most of them. 28 are saying all of them are on the right seat, which is good, and 28% of you that's doing well, and 18% are saying some of them. So yeah, there's a bit of work to go there, but we're all aware of it, which is fantastic. But I think to sum that up, I think there's some really good points there. I love Zoe's point about the North Star, right? I think that's a really good visual. I'm a very visual person. Is what is your focus? What is your aim? What are you trying to do? As Jenny said, is communicate that, explain the good and the bad and where we're going. And to Tim's point around measure it, right? How do we measure success? How do we have those conversations if we're not? And how do we then communicate them when we are? So brilliant. Moving on to the next bit. So now we're moving into a positive thrive mindset. The next question is, how do we maintain that? So how do we build on this and move forward? So again, Zoe, I've been picking on you. You're first again. So how do we turn that type of thinking that you're speaking about in the previous slide, how do we turn that into muscle memory, and how do we make that a habit?
Thanks, Pete. I love being in the hot seat. It's all good. There's two things that frame our long-term thriving mentality. And the first one is about being a learner, or in Australian speak, learner. How was my accent? Was it all right?
Honestly, I didn't know who was on there, and I thought someone else had taken over the podcast, the webcast then.
Yeah, terrible. I can't say it. So learner. So we need to be learning, always learning. And that keeps us humble, and it keeps us from having blinkers on. So that's the first piece that we need to always be mindful of. What am I learning? What's new? And that leads into the second piece, which is about being a futurist. And so Jeni talked about doing scenario planning, which is best case, worst case, and most likely. And we can extend that. So instead of just doing it in reactive crisis mode, we can be proactive and on the front foot, looking at the trends that are happening around us, short-term and long-term trends across a whole bunch of different factors. And so when we have an eye to the horizon, we can start to build potential scenarios that allow us to jump on opportunities as opposed to just being reactive to what's being dished up to us. So being a learner and being a futurist are two of the important factors. In terms of the fundamental practices to keep us in a thrive mentality and also thrive situation, there's the 3 R's. The first one, and it's related to the learner principle, is reflection. So we need to not only be looking forward to what's next and what's possible, we also need to be looking backwards to see how far we've come. Because when we look back at how far we've come, we get a sense of inspiration, we get a sense of satisfaction, we get a sense of optimism and confidence. So reflection to see how far we've come, and also reflection to see what worked and what didn't. So I love the way that Tim was describing his practices around that. You know, they were measuring quarterly to see if they were on track. And that reflective practice is pretty important, because that allows us to capitalize on the stuff that works and to tweak the stuff that isn't working so well. The second R is about building reserves. And I learned this principle about 20 odd years ago when I first got into coaching. And one of the things they taught us as coaches was help your clients to build reserves, reserves of time, reserves of energy, reserves of money. Even to the toilet paper point that you made earlier, having reserves of toilet paper so that you need not ever worry. And this is way, way pre-pandemic. And so that when you have a month's supply of toilet paper or baked beans or whatever, when you have a cupboard that's fully stashed, and you don't have to be a prepper necessarily to do this, you don't really need to worry. And this kind of really got driven home to me earlier this year when I had about what I thought was 100 Ks left in my petrol tank in the car. And I went to the airport. When I could get on a plane, it was in like narrow window of being able to fly. Did a flight, came back, got in the car, and guess what? The petrol gauge was incorrect and it bottomed out at 0. And I stalled my car on the roundabout at the airport at 11 o'clock at night, and a huge amount of disaster ensued. And that's when I remembered and resolved to never disobey the law of reserves. Always have enough to get more than enough than what you need. And that applies to material resources, to finances, to staffing, to time. So building reserves is what allow you to have flexibility when unexpected crisis comes on board. So that's the second R. And the third R is really super important. The leaders that actually have managed to be able to thrive and carry on are the ones that have very disciplined renewal practice. That means they look after themselves exceptionally well, exercise, meditation, sleep, nutrition, and so that our energy is always at optimum. And that renewal becomes an essential part of a long-term ability to thrive. And without that disciplined practice of renewal, then we are just going to fade out and burn out. So yeah, reflection, reserves, and renewal, being a futurist and being a learner. Those are my key points for long-term thriving.
I've written down the 3 R's. Now, I just want to check. Are you telling me that you're not Australian? I'm confused. That's not an Australian accent?
No, I'm Canadian. We should have mentioned that from the beginning. Yeah, I got imported from Canada in '96, so I've been here for 25 years.
Well, it's the accent of that Australian now. I assumed you were Canberra born and bred.
Yeah, right.
And look, I love those 3 R's. That final one, renewal, I think is super important. I think there's, particularly in males, I think there's there's can be a poor relationship between punishment and reward around how we push ourselves from work. So understand and be kind to ourselves both physically and mentally to make sure we've got the energy to push through to be there for the business and for our colleagues, I think is super important. So thank you for raising that. So Jeni, onto you in relation to the process side of that. So, business is a marathon, not a sprint. We come out of this with this burst of energy because we're allowed to see our friends and meet people again. What happens after that deflates? How do we make sure that that's not just a flash in the pan and we can continue on and be successful long term?
There's lots of EOS tools. I think that planning really comes into it. So we look at what's your 10-year target? In 10 years' time, what do you want the business to look like? In order to achieve that, what does a business need to look like in 3 years' time? And then what's your 1 year plan? So always sort of, 1 year, 3 year, 10 year, and 10 year long term could be 5 years, could be 20 years. So that's one way. And humans tend to work in a 90-day cycle. So from that 1 year plan, we then break it down and say, well, what do we need to do this quarter in order to hit that 1 year plan? So, and then in 90 days, you get back together, reflect and, line in the sand, that was a quarter that was, and reset for the next quarter. So there's that sort of cycle. What happens after 90 days is everybody, starts to get out of the same boat where we've all been rowing in the same direction and starts heading off on their own. But then there's things that you can use every day, like scorecards. So, coming back to that, your lag and your lead measures, what's the activity, what's the outcome that we're looking for. Again, that sort of keeps everybody on track and looking forward. And one of the best tools, I think, within EOS is what we call our level 10 meeting or L10 meeting. So meetings that happen, your leadership team meeting happens every Monday at 2 o'clock. And it's not, I haven't done my, what I was supposed to do from last time, so we won't have it this week, and 3 weeks have gone by. So it's constantly, same agenda, starts on time, finishes on time. Everybody gets to raise issues, solve issues. So there's those tools that sort of bring that consistency and bringing issues out and creating a culture in the business where every business has issues. We can raise those. We have a process to follow to actually get them solved. So the business is constantly moving forward. There's nothing worse than having a conversation, talk round and round and round and round an issue. Everybody leaves thinking somebody's going to do something. You come back next week, next month, next quarter, and you're having the same issue. I thought you were going to do it. Yeah. So having those consistent measures that you sort of get into that, everything that we're doing, it's all about what's best for the business, what's best for the team, what's best for the client, which sort of comes back to Zoe, saying, that, the reflecting and, renewal, keep things moving forward, not just, spinning your wheels and going over the same thing.
Yeah. So really that, that longer term plan, you need a plan, right? You need a short, long and medium and long term plan. And then you need to stay consistent. And I think that's really critical about those meetings. Don't let them slide off. We're all busy. We'll let it go. Keep that consistency and hold everyone to account on that. And that's really good points. Tim, what are you seeing out there? Like for the businesses that you look at, good or bad, let's look at the good ones. What are you seeing that successful businesses that have been successful long term? It's not just those flash in the pans, ones that have gone from that good to great. What are the key metrics or things that they do that you're trying to implement in Access4?
Yeah, I think for me, there's a couple of things. I think trust and transparency for me. I've got to trust that our employees are going to do the right thing for the business. But, I think our team trust us that we're going to do the right thing in their best interest. And I think if you have that, that's a good start. And I've been in businesses where that hasn't happened and it falls apart and there's attrition and there's a lack of performance. I think transparency for me is the other thing. People don't want to be surprised. I don't want to be surprised when someone walks out, but I also don't want staff surprised when we say, oh God, we're moving next week and we've just changed office. You prep and you work through your senior leadership team to make sure that those things are made aware. I think for me then, the three key things that I look at for probably executing and getting right is that laser focus. It's very easy to get distracted. and, you know, flashing light, and we'll go and play with that. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't contribute to your strategy, leave it alone, and focus on what you're trying to do. I think the next one's discipline. So that discipline to come in day after day and say, I am actually going to execute on what the plan says. Again, very easy to get distracted. And then I think the third one for me is accountability. We have it at our senior leadership, and we expect our team leaders to do that. And that's really around, if we're going to commit to do something, you know, bar COVID coming in and then we pivot, but, you know, how do we actually have that level of accountability so everyone trusts that everyone's going to do what they say? And then I think, to my point, then pivot. You know, we've had to pivot through COVID. I think good businesses do. To Zoe's point, that's probably that renewal thing. You keep looking at it, reflecting on it, and you know, just because you've got a 3-year plan in place doesn't mean it's hard and fast. You've got to be able to actually reflect, measure, and then if you tweak it, you tweak it, but you tweak it with a really level of detail around what you've gone into. It's not just an ad hoc decision on a Friday because you didn't think the results went that well for the week, but certainly you've got to be able to pivot and then take the people on the journey with it. You know, having the right people on that bus, and they go, yep, great, we understood why that decision was made and it's transparent, we communicate it. It's great. And I think that's where I think good businesses seem to do a lot better, rather than ad hoc or knee-jerk reactions to things that are going on.
I think they all tie in, don't they? So if you've got Zoe's 3 R's, which are giving you that base, you're following Jeni's planning, so you've got some real data to be able to look back as to why you've made those decisions. And then you're in the business deciding, well, you know, yes, we had a 3-year plan, but we now have the confidence to say we need to pivot because we've got the data, we've got the review, we're communicating with our staff, we're now going to go in a different direction. So yeah, I think having all that information and following that discipline allows you to make those informed decisions. So we have another final survey up for if everyone wants to have a look at, is what good habits make a successful organization. So we'd love to get your feedback. There's a few choices on there, so please let us know what you think. So that was really good, guys. I really appreciate us getting into that from survive to thrive mindset. We have actually got a bonus round. So there was another question in here that I threw in if we had a little bit of time, and we do. So I want to get you guys' opinion on a topic that Jeni's mentioned. That seems to be in the ether at the moment, and that is around the Great Resignation. And that's not a Charles Dickens book; it's a different. So what it is there's very much been a conversation around that about March of next year, based on what's happened in other jurisdictions that came out of COVID ahead of us, is that there's been a displacement and disruption in the workforce. They've seen a lot of people swapping jobs for, you know, a lot of the reasons that we've spoken about today that probably weren't happening in business, and also just people's feelings of getting beyond the emotion of what's gone and wanting a little bit of renewal. I'm going to go in reverse order. So I'm going to start with Tim. I'm going to give Zoe a break for a minute. I keep picking on her. I'm going to start with Tim. But what tips do you think you could give businesses around two things? One is the defensive. How do you keep on holding good talent in not only with the Great Resignation, but in general? But also, let's get into the offense. So, like, what can we do to attract quality staff?
Yeah, thanks, Pete. I think I look back and say I think there was an annual resignation every year. It was Jan. Everyone came back from their Christmas break and went, I've just reassessed the new year and I'm going to do. So maybe this is just on a grander scale because no one's been able to have a holiday for 2 years. But I think, to me, it's, you know, if you're not looking after your staff and you've got to rely on the Great Resignation to actually reflect and see what you can do better, I think that's a problem. I mean, I think as our business has grown, we've done things within our means, like where we could give better EVPs, more flexibility because our team was big enough, and it's really hard to give a huge amount of flexibility when you only got one guy importing, for example. But, you know, we've tried to readapt that probably biannually and look at it, and we're going through it again now at the moment. So it's really... But get the feedback from staff. Like, rather than saying, oh, this is what management think, we'll go and put in gym memberships and no one cares. Well, you know, I think we've failed as leaders if we're not actually really listening to what our staff want. So for me, I think it's around understanding what your staff want. Flexibility is a big one. People don't want to come back 5 days. So how do you actually make it work for them in that hybrid work environment? Inevitably, borders are going to open. So if you allow flexibility, people might go and do what they need to do and still retain their job. But if you're going to be hard and fast that you can't have a working holiday or you can't work out the Gold Coast for 3 months, you probably inevitably might lose people. So I think for me, it's about listen to your staff and be flexible, and where you can and where your means permit, try and offer as value to your staff as you can.
Yeah, a good point about that flexibility. You know, there's a number of surveys gone out there that saying, I think there was one there that 42% of employees would move jobs if their current employer didn't offer a flexible working arrangement, whereas the other one did. But when you went to millennials, that was over 54%. So really interesting point about, you know, we're having that conversation internally, right? Is how do we, what do we do about getting people back to the office? And very much that idea of encouragement, making that office a great place to interact and to be, and a few perks, rather than trying to use a stick to force people into the office. Jeni, from an EOS standpoint, and also the other areas of the business that you're involved in, I mean, you guys went through not only COVID, but you guys went through a successful merger as well. So congratulations on that. What are your thoughts about this? How do you maintain staff, and also how do you attract good talent?
Yeah, so our merger we announced in May 2020, went through in July. So, you know, what do you do in the middle of a pandemic? You take, you know, 15 and 13 people and chuck them together. 6 months later, a lot of them met each other for the first time, which was pretty weird. And now Otto is our rebranded business. So we've got 28 staff around the station in the Philippines. I think two things, and really sort of echoing what Tim said, I think flexibility. I think people have really now, you know, we know we can work effectively from home or from anywhere. Nick and I are planning, our son lives in London and haven't seen him since I was over there last March. So we're hoping to get over there next April for his birthday for a month. And you know, we can work from over there. I'm actually running a session tonight for EO Entrepreneurs Organisation in Idaho. So I'm starting at 2 a.m. and finishing at 9 a.m. So I'll be, you know, here all night. So that flexibility, and they probably won't be able to understand a word I say, that I say, but flexibility of being able
Zoe
to.
can give you some
or she's Canadian.
Language. Yeah, no, but it's getting up that way, you know. It's not Wisconsin, but it's on its way.
That's close. So yeah, so that flexibility of, you know, if you want to go to, you know, escape Melbourne winter next year, which we haven't been able to do for the last couple of years, you know, work from anywhere. And my answer has always been to staff, oh, can I work from home on Friday? I don't care where you work from, as long as you've got your laptop, the internet, your mobile phone. I don't care if you're sitting on a Greek island, you know, knock yourself out. So that flexibility and that trust of people doing their job, and we all have the tools so that we know whether they're doing that or not, particularly, you know, PSAs, those sort of things. So, and communication. Something that I brought in back in GWM days prior to the merger, we called our IDP, Individual Development Planning. So every 90 days, I would meet with every member of the team and go through a whole bunch of questions about, you know, what's your plan for, you know, what's your long-term planning? What's your, you know, what do you want to achieve for the next 90 days? What's your training plan for the next 2 years? But one of the questions that I asked was around our culture. What about our culture inspires you to be your best? And what can we do to improve that, to continue to build the culture? And always made sure that feedback was went through to the leadership team. And even if it was a no, we weren't going to implement, it came back to that person so they knew that they'd been heard. So flexibility, communication.
Fantastic. And Zoe, a final word for you on this particular topic. What advice would you give around staff holding on to them, but also acquisition?
Thanks, Pete. Well, I think before I had this piece of news come in this morning, I would have said, stick to the basics, have a purposeful organization, meaningful work, make sure that you are talking to people and giving them praise and recognition. And then I got an email this morning. It's very timely. It came in from OTTA, O-T-T-A, which is American tech-based recruitment company. And they surveyed 25,000 IT workers about what they were looking for in the Great Resignation, if they were seeking jobs. And number one, and this surprised me completely, was diversity and inclusion.
Excellent.
Yeah. I was like, wow, that was number one. Number two was meaningful work. And number three was recognition and reward. Now, we've all thought, and me included, that the ability to have flexible working conditions was something that was really important. And on this list, it turns up at near the bottom of the list, with 6% of respondents looking at flexibility and well-being as a priority area. And I think because the tech space is probably already flexible compared to other workplaces. So that was really, really interesting article, and I'll forward it to you. So if you want to, you can forward it on to your people. But yeah, diversity, inclusion, meaningful work, and recognition. Recognition has always been a perennial. I've seen that backed up by other research as well. That saying that you're doing a good job, and I see you doing a good job, and this is how it's contributing to the work as a whole and the customers that we're serving, is a huge motivator for people.
Yeah, really good points. We did a survey at a previous life and talking to salespeople at the coalface, and then we went and talked to MSPs about what they thought as well. And there really was a disconnect between, the assumption it was all around money, where it was what it was about was, as you said, recognition, feeling there was a career path advancement and communication were those big areas. So yeah, sage words from everyone. So thank you very much. So we are nearing the end of our time. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw it open to any questions we have from our audience. But in the meantime, I just wanted to thank everyone for their points today. There's been some fantastic comments, and I've brought a ton of information here around the 3 R's and a number of other things as well that I'm going to take away with me as well. But while we're waiting to see if there are any questions, because I'm just conscious of time, what I thought we would do, so we'll go back and see if there is any questions. We would talk about a couple of books and a couple of bit of information that you guys have made kindly available. So Jeni, can you tell me about these couple of books that, in this case, you're recommending? I've read Traction. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And also what this QR code is up on the top there.
So I was trying to be very fancy, so I hope it works. We tested it, but
we did test it. Yeah,
we did test it. Yep, that should work. So Traction is EOS, so Entrepreneurial Operating System, basically bringing structure, accountability, and discipline into an entrepreneurial business. So Traction is the nuts and bolts. It's the reference manual of the EOS system written by Gino Wickman 10, 12 years ago now. Get a Grip is Traction, but it's EOS brought to life, very Patrick Lencioni style of writing. So it's the story of a business implementing EOS. So to me, Traction, if you're a details person, what we call an integrator, you keep the trains running on time, Traction. If you're a visionary style of person who, very much sort of big picture, don't get into detail, Get a Grip is probably an easier read. So I've got copies of both. So the QR code will take you to my LinkedIn profile. Drop me a message. So connect with me, just drop me a message, say, hey, I'd love a copy of either Get a Grip or Traction, whichever one appeals most, and your address, and I'll get those in the mail to you.
Brilliant. So that's, as I said, Traction I've read. I haven't read Get a Grip, but I absolutely love Traction. So really resonated with me. So it's a fantastic offer. I'll leave that QR code up there just for a couple of seconds. There is one question that's just came through, which is, what's the best way to connect with the panel? Certainly we've got everyone's details will be on there that we'll send through. But you'll see an email address at the end from Access4, which we can certainly pass on any messages and do an introduction there as well. If anyone hasn't, I'm going to click past this, but everyone doesn't have that QR code, hit us up in the chat and we'll bring it back up. So thank you for that, Jeni. That's a very kind offer for you to offer to everyone. And the next one is just to have a quick chat about Zoe's book, which I am in the midst of reading, which I absolutely love. So it's been fantastic. So Zoe, tell me about People Stuff.
I'd love to tell you about People Stuff.
Well, you've told me about People Stuff, but tell me about People Stuff, the book.
The book. Absolutely. So the essence of this book is about perspective, how we see ourselves, how we see others, and how we see the bigger picture so that we can lead more effectively. So a big piece of it is about how to hone your leadership thinking so you can see far, deep, and wide and be proactive rather than reactive. There's a big section on how you see yourself and which archetype that you can channel so that you can be more flexible and responsive in the situations that you need to be. The most popular chapter is on the 4 devils of People Stuff. So how to deal with difficult behaviors that are challenging and problematic. And the last chapter is about how to see the even bigger picture so that we have a greater sense of community and wholeness. And that is the book Yeah, and if you want a short version of that, I have a free report on my website, a free guide called How to Spot and Deal with Difficult Behaviors in the Workplace. And that's at zoerouth.com, ZOEROUTH.com. Click on resources and it's all there for you.
Brilliant. I'm up to the leadership in crisis. I'm really enjoying it. It was all super relevant to what we were talking about. So we've got an offer as well. So for the first 30 people who hit that email address, marketing@access4.com.au, we will send a copy of Zoe's book out to you guys. So marketing@access4.com.au. Tim, stop typing. You're not getting one of the books. You can borrow mine when I'm finished with it. All right. Just gotta wait. You know, I'm a slow reader.
I'm already halfway through it, Pete. So
you got one. Oh, I thought I was special. Jeez. Okay. Fair enough. Well, so yeah, the first 30. So please shoot that in. There's a comment here from Jack as well, which was just a comment, not a question, around people's mindset. He said what people weren't wanting to make decisions through that lockdown, but they're really coming out of that now. And that's, it's a really good point, Jack. And I guess that was the main purpose of this this webinar, was to help our partners really see that now, is that there would be a pent up demand, and it would be a requirement out there, and getting our staff and ourselves into that mindset to be going asking those questions. So it's good to see you are asking those questions, Jack. That's fantastic, and I hope you're doing well up north. So I think that's all the questions we have. So I would like to thank our panel very, very much for joining us. Zoe, thank you very much for your time. Jeni, thank you so much for your time as well. Tim, you had to turn up anyways, but thank you very much. We do appreciate you coming on there. And we do appreciate you taking your time and efforts to come and join us and give your wisdom to our attendees. So again, thank you very much, everyone, for your attendance, and to everyone out there, thank you very much for joining us. We will be doing these regularly. So if these were for a value, please let your account managers know, and please keep in contact. But to everyone, I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day, and take advantage of what's going to come in the future. So thanks everyone.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, Tim.
See you now.